Hey, we're YouTube creators Becky and Chris, and we make travel and adventure films. And today we're going to show you how we use warp stabilizer in Adobe Premiere Pro to fix a lot of our shaky shots, because there are a lot of them because she films most of them and her hands are more shaky than mine.
We're also going to show you how to fake tripod shots, which is one of my favorite things to do. You're throwing me under the bus.
I am throwing you under the bus. But seriously, we do a lot of run and gun filmmaking, and we find ourselves in a lot of precarious situations, oftentimes without enough time to set up a tripod or gimbal, in which case warp stabilizer comes to the rescue. Now you might be asking, what is warp stabilizer? And to that I say, tracking points.
Magic.
Automatic tracking points.
Magic.
All right, so Becky's gonna show you how she uses it. This is truly a fix it and post moment.
So what is warp stabilizer? Well, it's a feature in Adobe Premiere Pro designed to automatically stabilize shaky footage. And basically how it works is the software analyzes the motion in the footage, then applies adjustments to reduce unwanted camera movements like small jitters and shakes, as well as vibrations. Okay, so here's how to use it. I have a clip here that I was hoping for a nice smooth panning motion, but there's a bit of jerking going on based off the fact that we were in a small helicopter in turbulence. Unfortunately, using a gimbal in this scenario was just not quite practical due to the fast-paced nature of this type of shooting and also the lack of space that we have. You can see there's a little bit of like jerking motion, and then there's also some panning there as well. So we're gonna throw warp stabilizer on this and see if it works. So we're gonna navigate over here to effects, and if this isn't here, you can come up here to window and then find effects, click on it, and it will show up. So we're gonna come to the search bar here and we're gonna type in warp stabilizer. And here it is. And we're just gonna take that and we're gonna drag and drop it onto the clip. And we're gonna let that analyze. You can track the progress of the analyzation of warp stabilizer in the effect controls panel right here. But we can also change some of the parameters to get a better result. The effect goes on at 50% automatically, but we can change the smoothness if it is a little bit too much, to say something like 5%. We could also change the result to no motion, which we'll talk about shortly. We could also change the method. By default, it's on subspace warp, and I find that's usually preferred. But we could change it to perspective, position, scale, rotation, or just position. If we drop down the advanced menu here, we have a lot more parameters that we can play with to get our best result, like checking detailed analysis or fast analysis. Or we could change the rolling shutter ripple to enhanced reduction. I just normally keep it on automatic. And then we can hide that warning banner if we like. But I like to keep that warning banner up just so I know that if something didn't analyze properly, that we can redo it. But for this example, we are going to leave it at 50%, which is the default settings. When you put this effect on your clip, it automatically goes on at 50%. And I like that as a starting point and then kind of adjust it from there. Sometimes it's too much and we get a bit of a wobble, and sometimes it's not quite enough. We'll adjust it on a clip-by-clip basis. So we can see here that the warp stabilizer worked really well, but we also have the horizon kind of doing this. We can actually straighten that out using rotation keyframes in the effect controls panel. So if we come up here to rotation and turn on keyframes, and we'll just drag that to the beginning of the clip, and we can come over here towards the end of the clip, add another keyframe, and then we can just change that rotation until that horizon looks straight. Once we have that rotation effect on, we have these black bars. And I'm gonna go ahead and scale that up until the clip is filling the frame. And then we can go ahead and watch this and see how it does. All right, that's a little bit better. You can finesse that, obviously, it would take a little bit more effort. Let's have a look at this one here, where we have kind of a handheld stationary shot, but there's a little bit too much wiggling going on. There's maybe a little bit of a slight motion. So we can use warp stabilizer to kind of iron out some of those little tiny wobbles. So again, we'll drop that on, let that analyze. We'll leave it at 50% and we'll play that back. And actually that looks really good. We kind of have this slow panning motion, and I actually like the way that looks. So this tool isn't just for smoothing out footage. We can also use it to fake a tripod shot. I actually really like the way handheld shots look. They can work really well for certain types of storytelling, but what if you want more control? Maybe your tripod was shaking in the wind, or you decided, hey, I want to control a slow zoom on this and this handheld motion isn't working. So we can use warp stabilizer for this. So we'll play this clip back. It's got a slight side-to-side handheld movement, but what if we just want that to look like a locked-off tripod shot? Well, we can take warp stabilizer and we can drop that on our clip, and then come back over to the effect controls panel where we can watch this analyze, and we can come down here to no motion, let that analyze, and then we can play that back, and now it looks like a completely stationary shot. So right now it looks like a still image because there's nothing moving in that shot. So we can make this actually more interesting by using keyframes to add more intentional movement to the clip, like we discussed in our time-lapse video, which you can find in the playlist. So pro tip, if you know you're gonna be shooting your footage in a less than ideal environment, like a fast car with the windows down, or you're doing a doors off helicopter tour, or maybe you're just shooting outside in strong winds on a tripod, and the shots don't require regular motion, shooting in a high frame rate like 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, and then slowing that down in Premiere Pro can also help you smooth out your shots, and you might get better results. This is something I like to do when we're shooting our helicopter series, especially if we're in a really unique environment and I know it's going to be bumpy because of turbulence. And I used warp stabilizer through our entire series for all of our shots, especially when we're shooting more telephoto focal lengths. You can still use warp stabilizer on your high frame rate shots as long as you follow the interpret footage recipe we shared earlier in this playlist.
True or false, warp stabilizer saved our series heading west.
True. I use warp stabilizer more in those 6 videos than I have my entire 7 years on YouTube, I think.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it saved me.